Ace1 Audio.
Hello everybody, Dan from Ace1 Audio here, how y'all doing? For those who don't know, I was the primary sound designer for the Fog Realm.
Show me how you drive.
Hi. You go boom boom.
Today, I'm going to be going over some of the production techniques I used, breaking down my process, and giving insight to some overall behind-the-scenes developments when it came to the sound production. In a film like Fog Realm, the engine sounds are arguably the majority of the sound design. There is rarely a frame of animation where there isn't some kind of engine somewhere. Now, there were two ways I could have attacked the sounds. I could have either A, been faithful to the original films, which means treating every car the same, potentially reusing sounds, and in essence stripping away their identity. Or B, in an attempt to create an evolution of the franchise and stand apart from the original films, use different sounds for each car. You can guess which option I chose. When I first joined, I had the idea of potentially trying to record actual engine sounds akin to the productions of Masafumi Mima. You know, one of the most iconic sound designers in all of anime. He did Initial D. Unfortunately, finding the various models we'd need in Australia would prove challenging and expensive. This film ain't got no budget. From there, I needed to find a different solution. I had expected that by the time I joined, development had moved to Unreal. This would have actually been quite exciting, as it would make overall sound design more unique. Since Unreal is a game engine, I was expecting to use a middleware such as Fmod, and some coding to control the engines essentially in real time and sync them up to the animation. Really crap computer, so I had to do it the old-fashioned way. During a conversation with a friend, I lamented about how I'd love to be able to synthesize the engines, but couldn't find the right tool, which is when I was turned on to Engine Simulator by Arms the Great. I have to admit, this software was actually pretty cool, and damn near solved my problems. But I ran into a major issue that I hope will be addressed with a proper release, and that is that most engines have a very similar sound. Don't believe me? Why don't you listen to the temp assets? It's so bad. I do like side draft sound, and I actually wanted to keep it. Fun fact, you can actually hear Side Draft's original engine in the release date trailer. That's because at the time of the trailer's creation, we were still using the simulations as temp assets, with Side Draft intended to remain in its original form. That said, Engine Simulator itself is an interesting idea and has potential. I'd love to see a feature added in where it could be controlled via a door or even run within a door, similar to Igniter from Kronos. I actually would have loved to use Igniter, however it retails for $400 US, which is more than I was willing to invest in Fog Realm, outside of my hours, even if it would become a tool I might use later. And don't forget, I'm Australian. At the current conversion rate, that becomes like $633. That said, I would have liked to use Fmod or WWise as well, because of the way engines can be designed in those softwares, but they don't have any means of being controlled by Pro Tools, or even easily sending audio to Pro Tools. I mean, many other softwares can, RX, Soundly, even other DAWs. It's bizarre. And it makes the sound design industry feel stagnant, despite everything else that releases. In the end, I decided the best option was to consult one of my sound libraries for all the relevant engine sounds, which is what you hear in the final release. For my own job security, I won't reveal where they were sourced from, but after downloading them, it basically became a case of determining what kind of engine sound was required for each scene and dropping it into my timeline with a little bit of splicing and time adjustments. Now, I could go on an entire spiel about how I determined what engine to give each car, but in truth, Vulcan had already outlined what engines he wanted the cars to sound like if given the chance. So I used that list as a basis and tried to find matching models, and if I couldn't, then I'd get something close enough. Vulcan still had to sign off on them regardless. I also want to take a moment to discuss the drones as well, as they deviate a fair amount from the source material. Originally, I tried to use various different, smaller, but high-speed motors that could naturally create a high pitch, such as a drill to create the sound of the drone cars. But I often found myself unsatisfied with the results. I even tried to use a plugin that creates shepherd tones, and whilst they were cool, they didn't have the effect I wanted. I ended up getting in contact with a member of the original production team, who I will not be disclosing for privacy reasons, because I know how fucking crazy this community is, and they revealed to me what the original sound was. I couldn't make it work regardless. However, after a short workshop with Dan Brum, he's the sound designer for Bluey, I was inspired to begin investigating the sound of an EV, as their internal motors have a unique and sci-fi-esque sound to them. And after demoing it and showing it to the rest of the team, it received praise all around.
Yes, Queen.
So it was kept. Simple as that. I understand it's a decision that the community won't entirely agree with. However, it feels like a more modern approach, and my opinion is that Fulcrum is a showcase of this community's abilities and interpretations of the franchise. I didn't want to be a sole recreation of what came before, but pay homage in my own way as a sound designer. The only issue with using EV engines, or at least the samples I did, is that EVs supposedly only have 2 gears and don't behave the same way a typical combustion engine does. So for the scene where the 3 drones break off from the main group and turn around, I actually had to use plugins that replicate the speed up and slow down effect to make it sound like these cars at varying speeds. Specifically, Avid Verify. I feel it sometimes comes across as a bit too aggressive though, and I probably should have used Warp from Baby Audio, which performs a similar task but in real time as opposed to being baked in. It's one thing to simply place the sounds on top of a video, but I pride myself on slotting the sounds into the environment, so that when the cars are whizzing through the realm, you actually feel it in your ears, further immersing you. It's a laborious process, but one that really pays off, and I used a number of techniques to make this happen. The first is relatively simple. Panning. I damn near went through this entire film frame by frame multiple times. Fuck, where the fuck my script go? Adjusting the left and right values of the engine sounds. When Blazer storms off, you can hear the cars as he passes them, moving from one speaker to the other. Right after everyone enters the realm, it's like you are standing there on the track as everyone flies by you. It's relatively easy to do. Easy, yes, but it pays off tenfold. The panning technique was often complemented by some Doppler effect, which requires a bit more technical prowess and is a pain in the ass to get right. But again, it makes a difference. And if you don't know what the Doppler effect is, I recommend watching a video by Scruffy where he breaks it down pretty well. Anyways, this was achieved by using Waves Doppler. The basic gist of how to use this plugin is that you place the start and end point within a virtual space and adjust the center point accordingly, and then tell it how long the sound goes for. And if the plugin actually works correctly, this shit is old! You can tell it at what time the sound should be at the center point. The plugin then does the rest. Another issue arises, however, as Doppler is used multiple times in the film, sometimes simultaneously. So how do I do that with a real-time effect? Do I use multiple? Do I change the parameters as the film progresses? No, that would take too much processing power, and probably crash the session. So instead, I do what's called a print. If you don't know what printing is in the audio world, it's basically where you re-record something. Typically it's used on mixed signals, but in my case, I'm using it to create versions of the engines where the Doppler effect is baked in, making it easier for my computer to handle it. This last technique is probably my favourite, and is best demonstrated during the chase scene where all the cars drive off into the distance. They sound really far away, but how? Simple. Reverb. No, not that kind of reverb. Except, it's not as simple as just adding on reverb, as when the cars move further away, the reverb goes with it. The sound doesn't travel, so how do I get around that? It's called a send. In the professional world, it's standard practice to have your reverb effect on a separate channel called a return track. A send in this configuration will in essence duplicate the audio from one track to another in real time. There's still a problem here though. Whilst I can control the volume of the sound going to the send, it's still tied to the volume of the main track. For example, if the main channel is set to 0 dB, in essence doing nothing, and the send is set to -5 dB, the sound on the return will always be 5 decibels quieter. I could try get around this by making the volume on the send louder, for example by 5 decibels, but it will still become quieter as I turn down the main channel. The actual workaround is to use a pre-send. A pre-send will instead ignore whatever the main channel does with its volume and only follow the send volume. So in this example, let's make our send -5 dB. It will still be 5 decibels quieter than the main channel at 0 dB, but if the main channel is also set to -5 dB, they will be the same. If the main channel is then turned down to -10 dB, the return channel will be louder. And if I turn the main channel down to nothing, then all we will hear is whatever is on the return. Are you still following me? Now let's put our reverb on the return channel and slowly turn down side draft. Sounds like it's getting further away, doesn't it? And if I turn the main back up, here she comes! Every time we are watching a car drive on screen, we can hear the reverb. It just helps place the cars in the scene and seem more realistic. But what about when we go inside the cars? Ah! We can still hear it! Now how do I get rid of that? Well, that's actually easy. I could mute the return track every single time we go inside one of the cars, but that takes too long. And if I missed one accidentally, it would be painfully obvious. Instead, I have the software do it automatically. But how does it know, I hear you ask? Well, I tell it. Sort of. It makes use of a technique known as sidechaining. This is more often used for music to turn down other tracks when certain instruments are playing. Here's an example. I have a guitar track and a drum track. This is how they sound on their own. But if I use a sidechain with the drums as a trigger, whenever the drum hits, the guitar gets quieter. I can even make it so that when the drums hit, the guitar's mute. I can take this same principle technique and apply it to the reverb. I first do this by placing a send on each internal shot track and setting it to 0 dB. I then place a compressor on the return track after the reverb and set it to automatically kill the signal. Now nothing gets through. But if I tell the compressor to listen for the send, now it reverbs until we go inside the car. And the reverb stops with no tail. I also like to place one before the reverb just to make sure nothing can accidentally get inside before we go outside again. At which point it's completely reset and ready to go again. Now I can go about my work and not worry about having to turn off the reverb manually. A similar technique is used on the dialogue reverb as well, so that when the characters are talking, but we aren't inside the cars, there's no reverb on their voice.
Hey amigos, we got a fork up ahead. Stick to the right side and stay together.
The main difference is that I control it using a cue track that you never hear because it goes directly into the relevant compressors and doesn't use a send. The sound of the film is more than cars or music and people talking. We have bumps, scrapes, skids, and doors, as well as a few other iconic sounds from the franchise I'd have to mimic. Originally, when I was still trying to join the team, I just said, to hell with the original sounds, and simply used whatever I had. Actually, I came out pretty cool. A fair amount actually got reused. Yeah, let me show you. I still wanted to be somewhat faithful to the original films though, which meant tracking down some original samples. Not doing / using film rips. That's tacky, sorry, not sorry. Thankfully, it's well documented online that sound ideas and Hollywood Edge samples were used for the films, and we later discovered that the films also made use of Sound Deluxe, which, no, I don't have. It's a library that costs $25,000 and is 2 terabytes in size! And a fourth library I'll discuss later. The exact samples aren't documented, but it was at least a good enough starting basis. We had to do some hunting, but eventually we were able to track down copies of some of the original libraries, specifically the 6000 series, the Edge Edition, and the Premiere Edition. And I gotta say, having such iconic sound libraries in my possession is... wow. Despite this though, these libraries felt a bit limiting. They were good, don't get me wrong, but I didn't like the idea of solely relying on these ancient-ass sounds. So I mixed in some of my own that I've collected over the years from various sources, which results in a product with its own identity and becomes something unique. Give this to any other soundie, and they will have their own collections, with their own techniques, and it will be a completely different product. Heck, even if I just sat someone down at my desk with my tools and told them to have at it, it would still be different. But my version is the best. There isn't really much I can say when it comes to spotting and sound effects. But there are some notable scenes I'd like to speak of when it comes to sound design. Galorum's scene was one that really annoyed me, if only because finding the various machinery sounds required was a bit difficult, particularly for that first shot with the podium. Why is that scene even in the film? It's a case of where you know what it should sound like, but you can't think of the proper wording. I tried to make the sounds myself, but I ended up using something sampled from a train. I mean, hey, it works. It sounds good. What else is there to say? The rest of the scene was pretty straightforward. Just some servo and hydraulic sounds to make the chair sound good. That's appropriately timed to the distinct sounds of snapping into place. In contrast, RDLM was fun to make sounds for. Originally, he had a more mechanical feel with clicking ratchets for every movement, in addition to the servos.
Yes, good. It will be done.
Valken didn't like it. Blazer's plow actually went through 2 iterations. Originally, you just had the sword noises, as that's all they were in Excel races. I couldn't find the original sample, mainly because I didn't want to dig through thousands of sounds to remain faithful, so I used modern replacements. On later rewatches during production, I opted to add in some more mechanical noises to imply the car is actually doing something that we can't see, which resulted in what you hear in the film. The wheel. That was solved accidentally. I had a sound I was using for the wheel slam, at least temporary, but it's... well, we all saw that video. It's not great. Like a year or so later, I was experimenting with bullet impact effects for some reason, and found that the slowed impact layered with a few other effects gave me a pretty damn good recreation. There's actually a funny story around the portal opening. Whilst I was doing a deep dive, I came across a particular fire sample, and my exact words when finding it were, "Somehow, I think it might be useful." And we just kind of forgot about it for a few months, until Valken and I were discussing the portals, and when reviewing the portal opening at the start of Pipeline, I had a light bulb moment. It was the same sample. And because I was big-brained and made a note of the sound, I knew exactly where to find it.
I'm a fucking genius.
Layer that with a few other sounds that I found, and we have a perfect portal opening. Honestly, I'd love to share my version with the community, but I feel like there would be a few legality issues. The Nitrox scene had me scratching my head for a while. At first, I thought it was something custom and thematic, like the sound of a Hot Wheels booster. That was not the case at all. Originally, we had a rip we were using, so it was less than stellar quality. What no one told me for the longest time was that the original sound was discovered years ago. And which library did it find itself a part of? The Golden Era Library. A library known for being even more ancient than the 6000 series, and is basically in the public domain at this point. Free for everyone to use. Now that was bloody scary. I mean, these are sounds I rarely use because they are so ancient and don't have the same quality as more modern sounds, as in 6000 series modern, which was from the... oh, 1992. Go figure. Anyways, like I said, Golden Era Library, ancient, it was recorded on tape. Thankfully, it sounded okay. Better, even. Though I accidentally used the double fire variant, but Valken liked it. Personally, I kinda do too. It makes Silhouette 2 seem more powerful in the moment. And that's all I really have to say about my part in the Fog Realm. It was a genuine honor to be part of something this massive and work alongside so many talented individuals, whilst also putting my own skills to the test. Sound and storytelling is a great passion of mine, and I feel both this video and the Fog Realm reflect that. But hey, if you have more questions, feel free to drop them below, and I'll see what I can answer and when I can answer. And if you are, by chance, ever in need of a sound designer, please feel free to reach out. Both my email and website can be found in the description box down below. But until next time, I'm Dan from Ace One Audio.
Ace One